Let me say this simply and clearly, and I mean this. The country wasn't built by Wall Street bankers, CEOs, and hedge fund managers. It was built by you. It was built by the great American middle class.
Welcome now our political panel of Matt Gorman, Republican strategist and former communications director for the National Republican Congressional Committee, and Kevin Walling, Democratic strategist and the co-founder of Celtic Strategies. Well, let's start with you, Matt. It sounds like he's really appealing to President Trump's base. He's out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he's saying, I'm going to take back that Rust Belt.
Well, that's the thing. Joe Biden, it's a theory that he can appeal to the white working class in the Midwest, but it's simply that. It's a theory. He's been elected and reelected in Delaware. A poll that came out yesterday said that actually African-American women are his strongest constituency, and that white men were actually the lowest of the poll. So it's nothing to suggest in reality that he can appeal to that. And quite frankly, every single time he's run for president, he's melted down. You're right. He was second fiddle to President Obama, and he was elected, but there's nothing out there that proves that he can actually lead the ticket.
Well, Kevin, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether second fiddle is the position of Vice President of the United States. But putting aside that for 1 second, is he the best candidate to appeal to the middle class, the working class, as a practical matter, within the Democratic Party? We could put up a poll, and these polls are not worth much at this early stage, but a poll that shows that he's really way out in front of even Sanders.
Yeah, David, it's a great question. I don't think, to Matt's point, Joe Biden is anyone's second fiddle. As you see in that poll, he's at 39%, which is a significant bump since his announcement of 9 points back in March. But he's going to campaign hard across the country. It was a great rally yesterday in Pittsburgh. He's out with a new video this morning that is pretty much narrated by Barack Obama, speaking to all of the work that Vice President did with President Obama with regards to the middle class, with bringing back the auto industry, with passing the Affordable Care Act. So we've got a long way to go to Iowa, 8 months, but the Vice President's announcement last week and his rollout has been really strong.
So, man, it strikes me we just heard from the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader about a constructive discussion with the President of the United States on infrastructure. If, in fact, we were to get an agreement between the President and the Democratic leadership, would that actually take something away from President Trump's case in 2020?
No, I think it would actually help it. Again, he's always positioned himself as a deal maker, but I think the devil's in the details. They're talking about $2 trillion of spending on infrastructure. Republicans in the House are going to have a very serious problem with that, to say nothing of Republicans in the Senate. Many in the conservative caucus were very concerned about the deficit, even though they did pass tax reform. But so one thing I would watch is how Republicans in the House react to this meeting, react to the numbers thrown out there. But President Trump's been very consistent on infrastructure, and $2 trillion is a lot. So we'll see how Republicans maybe can walk this back in the House.
Well, walk it back, or how could they pay for it as a practical matter? I mean, the Republicans thus far said, let's talk about private money. It doesn't sound like that's going to be enough. Democrats, we just talked to Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland. He seemed to suggest maybe we should dial back some of the tax cuts. Matt?
Yeah, you're right. And if you think Republicans in the House or in the Senate are going to vote for a tax increase in an election year, I got a bridge to sell you. But I think that, whether it's the gas tax or other things, President Trump might be negotiating with the House Democrats, who, again, would have no qualms about doing that. Or, many presidential candidates or Democrats want to roll back tax reform, which cut middle-class taxes. But, again, I don't think it's a non-starter in the House and Senate among Republicans to raise taxes just about a year or 2 years before an election.
So, Kevin, is there some pressure on the Democrats, particularly in the House, the new elected Democrats in the House, to come up with some constructive activity beyond just investigating the president before the next election?
Yeah, David, it's a great question. I think you saw Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer today say we can do both at the same time. We can provide constitutional oversight of this president and his administration while at the same time working with him. And I'll note that both the president and the speaker and the leader agreed to a $2 trillion budget for this package. Now, I would love to campaign on the fact of, Republicans borrowing $1.5 trillion to provide tax cuts to the most wealthy in this country, to corporations slicing the corporate tax code, while at the same time arguing against rebuilding our roads, our schools, expanding broadband access and things like that. We welcome that debate in 2020. We ran on that in 2016, saying that we would put this front and center in terms of reinvesting in the middle class and rebuilding our communities. I welcome that debate as a Democrat heading into 2020 with the Republicans.
Kevin, I said that you can't pay too much attention to the popular polls at this stage. You do pay attention to money, who's raised the most money. And Joe Biden seems to be doing pretty well in that score as well. Is he got a lead just because of the money? We also have O'Rourke and Sanders who are up there.
Yeah, it's a great point, David. You know, he out of the gate in the first 24 hours, as the illustration suggests, raised $6.3 million. He led the field in terms of that crucial 24-hour notice. I think he surprised a lot of people. There were a lot of people that thought that he couldn't surpass Senator Sanders or Beto O'Rourke or others in this race. Money is obviously going to be important in terms of getting the word out, but it's important to note also too the number of folks that are donating and the size of those individual donations, all very low, so that he can go back to those folks over the next 8 months before Iowa to retarget them for additional asks.
Matt, the President of the United States has said he's not afraid of anybody. He's going to win no matter what. And just putting that to one side for a second, if you take a look at Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, or maybe the other candidates, which one might give him most trouble?
That's a good question. I think it would depend on who runs, and they're all going to appeal to different people. Again, Biden has the case he can appeal to the Midwest. Bernie, I think, is going to fire up the left. However, you have a far-right candidate against a far-left candidate. That could lead somebody in the middle to run. And with Beto, he could bring a lot of the Obama constituency there, but I don't think there's a lot of policy depth. And I would just point out when it comes to fundraising, there was some clever verbiage used by Vice President Biden's campaign and how they released those numbers. Only 3.6 to 3.9 million of that 6.3 was actually raised online. So half of that around that was essentially max out donors. And so they can't go back to those people. And I work for Jeb Bush. He's a great man, but $100 million didn't get him past the primary. So money isn't everything. And I would just point that out as well.
That's a great reminder. That is really smart. Okay, many thanks to Matt Gorman and Kevin Walling, our political panel for the day.